The wedding hall was a vision of perfection, a place where every detail seemed meticulously orchestrated to create a sense of awe. Crystals hung from chandeliers like suspended fragments of sunlight, scattering prismatic rainbows across the polished marble floors. The air was rich with the scent of fresh roses and lilies, mingling with the soft hint of wax from hundreds of candles that flickered like tiny golden flames. Guests dressed in their finest whispered in polite anticipation, adjusting their seats, smoothing their gowns, and straightening ties, while the delicate hum of a string quartet threaded through the atmosphere, each note hanging in the air like a suspended heartbeat. At the far end of the aisle, the bride appeared. Her gown flowed like liquid silk, brushing the floor with each step, reflecting soft light in a way that made her seem almost ethereal. But it was her eyes that captured attention. The glint of mischief, the secret promise that only the groom could understand. She walked with the poise of someone completely in command, yet every step carried a thrilling undercurrent of playfulness, as if the world around her existed only to amplify the moment she had been carefully planning. The groom stood waiting at the altar, shoulders squared, a confident smile playing across his lips. Pride, excitement, and just a touch of nervousness mingled in his gaze, though he had no inkling of the subtle, extraordinary gesture that would soon leave him utterly breathless. This was no ordinary handshake. To any outsider it would seem polite, almost perfunctory, a simple, customary touch. But beneath that simplicity was a language of intimacy, a coded signal crafted over months of shared glances, quiet jokes, and secret understandings. Each movement, each subtle shift of her fingers carried weight. A playful warning, a tender reassurance, a spark of surprise all rolled into a single fleeting moment. As she drew closer, the energy in the room seemed to bend almost imperceptibly around them. Guests leaned forward, curiosity and excitement shimmering in their eyes. Even the musicians appeared to sense it, the melody softening, stretching and hovering as if awaiting a secret signal. The bride's heartbeat quickened, not with fear but with exhilaration. She savored the knowledge of the impact her gesture would have, the way it would jolt him out of composure, make him acutely aware of the depth of their connection. Every breath she took, every subtle sway of her gown, was timed to perfection. The groom, oblivious to the secret waiting for him, focused on the vows, the ceremony, the life they were about to embark upon together. Little did he know that one handshake, so ordinary to anyone else, would convey more than words ever could. A silent revelation of intimacy, trust, and playfulness rolled into one. And then it happened. Their hands met. What seemed at first a casual gesture became electric. A surge of awareness shot through the groom, catching him off guard, leaving him stunned, exhilarated, and irresistibly drawn into the web of shared secrets that had always existed between them. In that instant, the ordinary blurred into the extraordinary. Time seemed to stretch, the murmurs of the guests fading into a distant hum. The handshake was more than contact. It was a message, a thrill, a tiny rebellion against the mundane, and a declaration of love expressed without a single word. Every eye in the room might have seen only a simple handshake, but they were missing the story unfolding beneath it, a story that only these two could understand. The wedding hall was nothing short of a dream spun into reality, a space where every detail seemed chosen to evoke awe and anticipation. Crystals dangled from grand chandeliers like captured fragments of sunlight, scattering rainbows across the polished marble floors. The air shimmered with the mingled scents of fresh roses, lilies, and a faint hint of vanilla from the candles that lined the aisle. Guests, dressed in gowns and suits that spoke of careful selection and social expectations, whispered in polite anticipation, adjusting collars, smoothing fabric, and exchanging soft, curious glances. The soft hum of a string quartet filled the space, a melody so delicate that it seemed to float above the polished floors, each note hanging in the air as if suspended by magic. The energy in the room was electric yet subtle, a quiet tension weaving its way among the seated friends and family. At the far end of the aisle, the bride appeared. She moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost impossible for someone in a gown that weighed layers of silk and lace. Her dress shimmered under the soft chandelier light, each step catching the glint of crystal embellishments and reflecting it like a constellation dancing across the hall. But it was her eyes that captivated all attention, the glint of mischief, the playful spark of a secret she alone held. Every guest who met her gaze felt a subtle intrigue, as though she were daring them to uncover a mystery they would never fully understand. She walked with the poise of someone who knew her power, yet her movements were laced with playful unpredictability, hinting at an undercurrent of cleverness that promised surprise. The groom waited at the altar, shoulders squared, his confident smile masking a flutter of anticipation beneath. He radiated eagerness, pride, and just a touch of nervousness, though he remained blissfully unaware of the secret choreography that had led to this moment. For months, the bride had been planning a gesture, subtle yet profound, meant to convey a private message wrapped in a single handshake. To the untrained eye, it would appear casual, a polite exchange that marked the ceremonial meeting of hands. But beneath that outward simplicity was an entire language of intimacy, humor, and trust, coded through months of shared glances, inside jokes, and whispered confidences. The tension mounted with every step she took closer. Guests leaned forward in their seats, intrigued by the energy radiating from the couple, sensing the electric charge in the air, even if they could not define it. The musician's notes seemed to stretch and pause, the soft hum of strings echoing the quiet anticipation of everyone present. The bride's heart raced, not with anxiety but exhilaration. She relished the knowledge that one perfectly timed gesture would leave him momentarily breathless, a tiny but significant revelation of their connection. Every sway of her gown, every slight tilt of her head, every twinkle in her eyes was orchestrated to heighten the suspense. She was about to turn an ordinary handshake into a moment suspended in time, one that would linger in memory far longer than the ceremony itself. The moment arrived. Their hands met. What appeared to be a simple, casual handshake became an intimate revelation. Electric warmth surged through the groom, and for a heartbeat the rest of the room faded away. Time seemed to dilate, each second stretching as he absorbed the full impact of her gesture. To anyone else it was just a polite greeting, but to him it was a message, a spark, a declaration of shared understanding that required no words. The bride's subtle movement spoke volumes, a twitch of a finger, a slight squeeze, a hidden rhythm of motion that unlocked memories, promises, and laughter only they had ever known. In that fleeting contact, the ordinary blurred into extraordinary, and the room, the music, and the polished chandeliers became mere background to the private world they had created. Behind her elegant smile lay a carefully guarded secret, known among friends and family for her cleverness, her knack for subtle gestures, and her playful intelligence. She had been orchestrating this moment for months. The handshake was no ordinary greeting. It was a code, a private signal carrying layers of meaning only the groom could decipher. Each step down the aisle had been carefully timed to maximize suspense, each glance laden with subtle clues that danced between mischief and tenderness. The bride's preparation had extended to the tiniest details, the precise angle of her hand, the soft pressure she would exert, the way her fingers would curl in a barely perceptible rhythm. These minute actions carried immense weight, the culmination of shared experiences, inside jokes, and promises whispered in private moments. As she approached him, her fingers twitched almost imperceptibly, a signal so subtle that anyone who did not know the code would never notice. Her heart raced with anticipation, delighting in the knowledge that this tiny movement would have a monumental effect on him. It was a masterclass in subtlety, a single gesture that could communicate more than 1,000 spoken words. The power of this secret handshake lay in its duality. It appeared mundane, ordinary, and polite, yet beneath the surface it was charged with intimacy, wit, and revelation. Every inch of her movement was calculated to preserve suspense while delivering a moment of pure emotional impact. The room seemed to hold its breath as she drew nearer. Guests were captivated, though they did not fully understand why. The energy surrounding the couple was tangible, a silent vibration that hinted at the extraordinary intimacy about to unfold. Even the musicians seemed attuned, the string quartet's notes rising and falling in perfect harmony with the unspoken tension. The bride's eyes sparkled with the thrill of mischief, her lips curved in a smile that promised both delight and surprise. She knew exactly when to release the tension, how to balance elegance with playfulness, and how to transform an ordinary moment into something unforgettable. As the groom extended his hand, unaware of the secret layered within, the bride felt a rush of exhilaration. Her fingers met his in a gesture that seemed simple to the untrained eye, yet in reality carried the full weight of shared history, humor, and love. The subtle squeeze, the deliberate rhythm, the hidden signal, all combined into a single moment that left him breathless. His eyes widened, his mind racing to process the delicate complexity of what had just occurred. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, every memory of their shared experiences rushing to the forefront of his consciousness. The handshake was more than a gesture. It was a bridge between private worlds, a confirmation of trust and understanding, and a thrill that left him momentarily suspended between surprise and joy. The bride's secret transformed an ordinary ceremonial act into a moment of pure magic. It was a revelation of intimacy, a playful declaration and a clever testament to the bond they shared. The audience might have seen only a polite handshake, but the couple experienced a private symphony of emotions: anticipation, delight, connection, and wonder, wrapped in a single, fleeting touch. The careful planning, subtle signals, and months of shared laughter culminated in an unforgettable, breath-stealing moment that would remain etched in memory for a lifetime. The groom stood nervously at the altar, a whirlwind of emotions churning within him. His chest tightened slightly, a subtle rhythm that mirrored the nervous excitement pulsing through every nerve in his body. The wedding hall was alive with a soft golden glow. Chandeliers reflected prisms of light across the polished marble floors, and delicate floral arrangements lined the aisle, their fragrance mingling with the faint scent of polished wood and fresh linen. Yet for him, all of this was background noise. His gaze was fixed entirely on the bride, who appeared to glide effortlessly toward him, her poise radiating elegance while concealing a mischievous secret. Every tiny detail, the sway of her gown, the way she tilted her head, the sparkle in her eyes, seemed to pull him closer, creating a magnetic tension that neither could ignore. He had known her for years, shared laughter, late-night conversations, and countless small adventures that had cemented a connection far deeper than most understood. Yet tonight, the intensity of that connection felt magnified, concentrated into this single, decisive moment. The mere thought of their upcoming handshake, a gesture that usually symbolized formality and politeness, now carried the weight of their shared history, unspoken promises, and inside jokes that only they could comprehend. He felt a flutter of anticipation in his stomach, an almost tangible pulse that quickened with each step she took. Her approach was measured yet seemingly casual, a paradox he struggled to reconcile. Each movement seemed choreographed to heighten his attention, yet effortlessly natural. Her fingers flexed slightly as she extended her hand, a barely perceptible twitch that spoke to a hidden layer of intention. He was acutely aware of every detail: the brush of her sleeve against his hand as she neared, the soft clinking of her delicate jewelry, the subtle fragrance of her perfume that made his head spin and heart thrum faster. It was as if the universe itself had slowed, compressing time to focus entirely on this singular gesture. The string quartet's notes floated through the air, yet he barely registered them. Each sound seemed filtered through a haze of emotion, amplifying his focus on her, on the imminent contact that promised something extraordinary. The anticipation was almost unbearable, an exquisite tension that coiled inside him like a spring ready to release. He wondered what message she might be sending, what secret layer of their shared world was about to unfold in this seemingly simple handshake. He realized that for all the years they had spent together, there was still so much about her he hadn't fully grasped. When their hands finally met, it was a shock of sensation unlike anything he had imagined. It wasn't just a handshake. It was a symphony of subtle pressures, tiny shifts in weight, and a rhythm that spoke of intimacy, cleverness, and shared understanding. The warmth of her touch contrasted with the firmness of her grip, creating a dichotomy that left him momentarily breathless. A spark seemed to travel through his arm, reaching deep into his chest, stirring emotions that defied articulation. It was both exhilarating and disarming, a blend of admiration, surprise, and a profound emotional connection that went far beyond the physical act. He became acutely aware of the room around him, the hushed murmurs of the guests, the flash of cameras capturing the moment, the soft rustle of chairs. But these details were peripheral, shadows in the periphery of his consciousness. Every nerve in his body was attuned to her, to the nuances of her gesture, to the unspoken communication that passed between them. In that moment, the handshake conveyed more than formality. It was a language of its own, a secret code that crystallized years of shared experiences, teasing and affectionate play. It spoke of trust, mutual respect, and a cleverness that only they could fully appreciate. As the seconds stretched, his mind raced with interpretations, replaying every glance and gesture leading up to this moment. He marveled at her ability to balance elegance with playful mischief, to embed a private joke within a public ceremony. The thrill of this secret intimacy, hidden in plain sight, made his pulse pound and his senses heighten. Each heartbeat seemed synchronized with hers, an invisible thread linking them through a shared understanding. He realized how rare and extraordinary such moments were, the intersection of romance, cleverness, and subtle artistry in a single, fleeting act. A subtle gasp escaped him, almost involuntarily, as the layers of meaning unfolded. His eyes widened, reflecting the astonishment and delight coursing through him. The simple handshake had become a revelation, a moment that encapsulated their journey together, revealing the depth of her thoughtfulness and the vibrancy of their connection. He felt simultaneously grounded and lifted, as if the mundane had been transformed into the miraculous by the intricacy of her gesture. Even as the handshake ended, the energy lingered. He could feel it reverberating through his chest, a resonant echo of the surprise, intimacy, and cleverness they had shared. The emotional impact was profound, leaving him momentarily disoriented, yet utterly captivated. Every subtle glance, every micro-expression in the moments following seemed to amplify the magic of what had just transpired. He realized that this brief contact had unlocked something extraordinary, a shared secret, a burst of joy and intrigue that would be remembered and cherished for years. For the groom, this handshake was more than a ritual. It was a revelation, a testament to their bond, and a celebration of the delicate, intricate dance of love, trust, and playful intelligence. The memory of this fleeting but transformative moment would be etched into his consciousness forever, a benchmark for the depth of connection possible between two people who truly understand and cherish one another. As he processed the cascade of emotions, he felt a renewed sense of awe, gratitude, and excitement for the life they were about to embark on together, knowing that this single, seemingly simple act had forever altered his perception of intimacy and shared understanding. The moment had finally arrived. All of the whispered anticipation, the careful choreography, the hidden tension, had led to this singular instant where two hands would meet, and the world would, for a heartbeat, pivot around it. To anyone watching, it may have seemed an ordinary gesture, a mere formality, a polite clasp that punctuated a wedding ceremony. Yet for the bride and groom, this handshake was anything but ordinary. It was the culmination of years of subtle understanding, shared glances, private jokes, and the quiet accumulation of intimacy that cannot be captured in words, but only in moments such as this. The bride approached with a serene grace, each step measured and deliberate, yet fluid enough to seem entirely natural. Her gown swayed gently with the rhythm of her movement, cascading in perfect folds that caught the light, throwing tiny reflections onto the polished floor. Every detail of her presence was designed to maintain suspense, to hold the groom, and in fact everyone present, on the precipice of expectation. Her eyes, sparkling with a mixture of mischief and affection, were locked on his, communicating a language only they could comprehend. There was a subtle playfulness in her gaze, a flicker of challenge that urged him to remain alert, to anticipate something extraordinary hidden within an ordinary form. The groom's heart raced as he watched her approach, a fluttering mix of anticipation, excitement, and unspoken curiosity. He had felt hints of her plan in earlier moments, the sly glance exchanged during the ceremony rehearsal, the barely perceptible twitch of her fingers as she adjusted her bouquet, the small knowing smiles they had shared in private. All of it had led to this. Now standing before her, the air itself seemed charged with energy, a tension that both thrilled and unnerved him. He knew something significant was about to happen, though he could not yet decipher its nature. The subtle interplay of past shared experiences and the impending moment created a rich tapestry of expectation, one that made the seconds stretch infinitely. When their hands finally met, the world seemed to shift. The contact was gentle at first, almost casual, a simple intertwining of fingers that would have appeared ordinary to the untrained eye. But the instant their skin touched, a spark, electric and undeniable, ran through the groom's body. The sensation was not merely physical. It carried layers of meaning, subtle vibrations that communicated intimacy, affection, and cleverness. The bride had perfected this gesture, calibrating it with precision to transmit messages far beyond what a handshake could traditionally convey. A small twist of her wrist, a calculated squeeze of his palm, a fleeting brush of her thumb. All these micro-movements were encoded with shared memories and promises, a silent dialogue between two hearts perfectly attuned to each other. Time itself seemed to slow. The guests, wrapped in their own anticipation and decorum, were entirely unaware of the hidden drama unfolding before them. To them, the handshake might have been a polite ritual marking the formal union of the couple, but for the groom it was transformative. Each subtle motion of her fingers, each delicate nuance in pressure, unlocked a cascade of emotions. He felt surprise, admiration, and a kind of awe that was almost spiritual in its intensity. The handshake became a lens through which he viewed their relationship anew, revealing depths of affection and cleverness he had never fully appreciated. He was acutely aware of every sensory detail, the warmth of her hand, the softness of her skin, the way her fingers moved with an almost musical rhythm, the faint fragrance of her perfume mingling with the scent of flowers and polished wood around them. Every element heightened his perception, turning what would otherwise have been a brief formal gesture into a fully immersive, multi-sensory experience. The pressure of her hand was calibrated just so, not too firm to be imposing, not too light to be dismissive. The tiny adjustments, imperceptible to anyone else, conveyed reassurance, intimacy, and playful challenge simultaneously. As the handshake continued, he found himself mesmerized by the subtle choreography. Each micro-movement seemed designed to evoke a specific emotional response, a silent language they had cultivated over months and years. He recognized the nuance of a slight twist of her fingers, recalling the inside joke that accompanied it. He felt the gentle squeeze of her palm, a reminder of the promise they had made to each other on a rainy afternoon long ago. The fleeting brush of her thumb hinted at a memory shared in secret, known only to the two of them. Every element of this simple act resonated with layers of meaning, making it feel as though they were the only two people in existence, cocooned in a private universe created in the span of a single handshake. His pulse quickened, his breath caught, and he became aware of an electric thrill coursing through his veins. This was more than a physical sensation, it was a revelation. In that brief contact, the groom could sense the depth of her thoughtfulness, her meticulous planning, and her understanding of the delicate interplay between intimacy and playful suspense. The handshake was an artistic performance, executed flawlessly yet invisible to anyone not attuned to its subtleties. It was a perfect example of how human gestures, when carefully crafted and deeply understood, could transcend ordinary meaning and become profoundly emotional experiences. The elegance of the bride's planning was matched only by the intensity of the groom's reaction. He felt an immediate rush of emotional resonance, a mixture of joy, astonishment, and wonder. The gesture had unlocked a private world that existed alongside the public ceremony, a secret dimension in which only they existed. It reminded him that intimacy is often hidden in the subtlest forms, not in grand declarations or dramatic moments, but in carefully calibrated gestures that speak volumes without uttering a single word. Every nuance of the handshake, the way her fingers lingered slightly longer than expected, the playful twist that hinted at a shared memory, the precise alignment of their palms, was a revelation of her cleverness and their connection. He marveled at the way a moment so fleeting could carry such weight. The handshake, which might have lasted only a few seconds to the naked eye, felt like an eternity in emotional time. He noticed the smallest details, the soft tension in her wrist, the tiny pressure adjustments, the imperceptible shifts in their mutual balance. It was as if she had orchestrated a secret symphony, with each movement producing a note and a melody of affection, trust, and playful intimacy. He realized that gestures, when imbued with intention, could become storytelling instruments capable of conveying narrative, emotion, and memory simultaneously. In those moments he was transported. He thought of the countless shared experiences that had led to this day. The late-night conversations, the laughter, the gentle arguments, the quiet support they had offered each other over time. Each memory seemed to be encoded in the subtle motions of her hand, a tactile representation of the layers of their relationship. What seemed outwardly ordinary, a simple handshake, was in reality a microcosm of their shared life, a crystallization of all the nuances, secrets, and promises that had defined their bond. The guests remained oblivious, still engaged in polite applause and whispered observations, entirely unaware of the profound emotional resonance unfolding in front of them. The contrast between public formality and private revelation heightened the intensity of the moment, creating a tension that was both exquisite and intoxicating. The groom felt an overwhelming gratitude for the cleverness, thoughtfulness, and depth of affection embedded in her actions. The handshake was no longer a gesture. It was an experience, a memory in the making, a private ritual elevated to art. As the handshake drew to its conclusion, he felt the lingering echo of the emotional charge, a resonance that stayed with him long after the physical contact ended. The subtle play of fingers, the intentionality behind each movement had created a permanent impression on his mind and heart. He was captivated, not just by her elegance, but by the depth of planning, intelligence, and care that had gone into transforming a simple handshake into a moment of wonder, intimacy, and playful revelation. Every detail, the firmness of her grip, the softness of her touch, the rhythm and cadence of movement, the timing of micro-adjustments, was now imprinted in his memory. He understood with profound clarity that love is often expressed not in grandiose declarations, but in tiny, deliberate gestures that carry immense meaning. The bride had taken a simple ritual and transformed it into a cinematic highlight, a private spectacle that was both playful and emotionally profound. The handshake had revealed her cleverness, the strength of their connection, and the depth of their shared understanding in a way that words could never fully convey. In the wake of the moment, the groom felt an almost intoxicating mix of admiration, love, and wonder. The memory of the handshake would remain with him forever, a symbol of intimacy, playfulness, and shared secrets. He realized that the beauty of human connection lies not in obvious displays, but in the quiet, deliberate acts that communicate care, understanding, and shared history. The handshake had become a metaphor for their relationship, a blend of subtlety, depth, cleverness, and emotional resonance, leaving him both stunned and utterly captivated. Around the wedding hall, a delicate web of observation and unawareness wove itself through the guests. From the polished wooden pews to the glittering crystal chandeliers above, the atmosphere exuded celebration and warmth. Laughter and hushed conversations created a soft undercurrent, punctuated by the gentle strains of a string quartet playing in the background. The room was filled with admiration for the bride's radiant presence and the groom's beaming confidence. Guests marveled at the careful decor, the floral arrangements, the elegant tables set in perfect symmetry. They noted the meticulous attention to detail, the subtle orchestration of colors, textures, and lighting that elevated the ceremony into something cinematic, something almost otherworldly in its beauty. Yet amidst this grandeur, an entirely different drama was quietly unfolding, one invisible to most eyes but profoundly potent to those attuned to the subtle energies of human connection. Most attendees remained blissfully unaware of the hidden layers embedded in the simple gesture that was about to take place, or rather was already unfolding. They saw the bride approach, radiant and composed, her gown flowing like liquid silk, and assumed she was merely taking her place at the altar, with the grace and poise expected of a bride on her wedding day. They saw the groom stand, confident and smiling, thinking he was simply exchanging a formal greeting with his soon-to-be wife. These surface impressions, the visible markers of traditional ceremony, masked the true complexity of the moment. Beneath the veneer of conventional ritual, a private world of emotion, coded gestures, and playful cleverness had been orchestrated with the precision of a maestro conducting a symphony. A few guests, however, could sense that something extraordinary was happening. They were the subtle observers, those attuned to human nuance and the small shifts that betray emotion before words can describe it. They noticed the brief flicker of surprise in the groom's eyes, a micro-expression so fleeting it might have been dismissed as a trick of light or a reflection of nerves. They saw a slight shift in his posture, a subtle lean forward as if drawn magnetically toward an unseen force, an almost imperceptible tightening of his fingers as he grasped the bride's hand. Even from a distance, these moments stood out to the attentive, an anomaly that suggested something beyond ordinary ceremony. Though they could not articulate it, these witnesses felt the pull of a deeper narrative, a story hiding behind the ordinary, whispering to those perceptive enough to notice. The contrast between what most guests saw and what a few were able to sense created a palpable tension in the room. For the majority, the moment was simply elegant, perfectly staged, a classic tableau of romance and celebration. For the few attuned observers, however, it was electric, charged with the thrill of uncovering a hidden dimension of human interaction. This dichotomy between appearance and reality heightened suspense, layering the experience for all present. Those who were paying attention became participants in a secret, unspoken game, encouraged to read into gestures, to infer meaning from the subtleties of movement, expression, and timing. Even among those who were not consciously analyzing, a subconscious recognition of intensity percolated through the atmosphere. They felt almost instinctively that something out of the ordinary had occurred. A shift in energy, a ripple of unspoken emotion passed through the room. Though they could not name it, they sensed the gravity of what had just transpired, the unusual weight of a private moment intersecting with a public ceremony. The subtlety of the bride's clever orchestration made the gesture invisible to many yet resonant enough to touch all in proximity. It became a shared experience that operated on multiple levels, from the literal and visible to the intimate and invisible. The room's energy oscillated between curiosity, admiration, and playful intrigue. Some whispered to neighbors, attempting to interpret the tiny cues that had caught their attention, trying to imagine what secret had just been exchanged. Eyes darted from the bride to the groom, searching for micro-expressions, for hints of emotion hidden in the smallest details. A raised eyebrow, A twitch of a finger, a fleeting smile that might suggest amusement or surprise. Each guest interpreted the unfolding scene differently, layering their own experiences, expectations, and imaginations onto what was happening. The diversity of perception created a dynamic interplay between what was real and what was inferred, a complex narrative tapestry that extended the reach of suspense beyond the moment itself. The suspense was magnified by the interplay between timing and subtlety. The bride had carefully modulated the pace of her movements, ensuring that no obvious cues betrayed the underlying significance of her gesture. The handshake was executed with flawless precision, slow enough to allow the groom to absorb each nuance, yet quick enough that the majority of observers perceived it as nothing more than courteous formality. This delicate balance ensured that the tension was preserved. Observant guests caught fragments of meaning, while others remained blissfully unaware, a disparity that created layered engagement, compelling even casual attendees to notice, to question, to wonder. Layered beneath this, the atmosphere carried an almost cinematic quality. Every element, the glint of the chandelier, the shimmer of fabric, the soft rustle of gowns, the faint scent of roses, contributed to the tension, amplifying the hidden narrative of the handshake. The environment itself became a participant in the unfolding drama, each sensory detail reinforcing the clandestine emotional exchange. It was as though the space conspired to elevate a simple act into a moment of heightened awareness, blending romance, subtle humor, and a quiet mystery that demanded attention. Even those not actively seeking to decode it were drawn into the narrative by the weight of the unspoken, the allure of hidden intention. Curiosity became contagious. Guests who had initially assumed the scene was conventional found themselves leaning forward slightly, subconsciously drawn to any sign that could reveal meaning. They noted the groom's slightly widened eyes, the minute shift in the bride's stance, the micro-expressions that betrayed emotion beneath practiced composure. Each observation, real or imagined, fueled speculation, generating a quiet, collective suspense that infused the room. The audience became complicit in the secret, a silent witness to intimacy cloaked in ceremony, participating without words in the unfolding intrigue. The delicate dance between perception and reality extended beyond the physical gestures themselves. Observers considered the narrative possibilities, imagining backstories and private codes that might explain the unusual energy between the couple. Conversations, if they occurred, were soft and speculative. "Did you see that? I think something just happened between them." Such whispers amplified the tension, creating an undercurrent of intrigue that persisted even after the handshake concluded. The gesture had transcended its literal form, becoming a story, a moment of shared human curiosity and emotional resonance that lingered in the consciousness of all present. Humor and playfulness were subtly interwoven into the atmosphere. Even without knowing the specifics, those sensitive to nuance could detect the bride's cleverness, the groom's astonishment, and the silent exchange of wit between them. The handshake, while intimate and emotionally charged, also carried a spark of mischief, a playful note that heightened engagement. The juxtaposition of seriousness and subtle humor created a rich emotional palette for observers, drawing them deeper into the moment and encouraging careful attention. What seemed like a simple formal gesture became an intricate performance, rewarding those who observed closely with layers of meaning and emotional texture. As the handshake ended and the groom's immediate reaction began to stabilize, the guests' curiosity persisted. Many speculated silently about what had occurred, trying to reconcile the ordinary appearance of the gesture with the extraordinary energy it had generated. The gap between perception and reality lingered, leaving a delicious ambiguity that made the moment memorable. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, admiration, and wonder, reinforcing the narrative that even the smallest human gestures could carry profound emotional significance when executed with intent and cleverness. The wedding guests' reactions created a complex layer of suspense and engagement. Their perceptions, whether attuned to nuance or unaware of the hidden drama, enriched the narrative of the moment. The subtle divergence between appearance and reality amplified intrigue, drawing the audience, both present and vicariously engaged, into a shared exploration of emotion, meaning, and human connection. The bride's clever orchestration, the groom's emotional response, and the audience's layered interpretations combined to transform a seemingly ordinary handshake into a spectacle of romance, mystery, and subtle humor, a testament to the power of small, intentional gestures in shaping human experience. After the handshake, the groom stood at the altar momentarily frozen in a state of suspended astonishment, His pulse raced, and his mind seemed to reel, attempting to decode the torrent of emotion unleashed in a few fleeting seconds. The energy of the gesture had penetrated him on multiple levels, physically, emotionally, and intellectually, creating a sensation that was difficult to articulate. Every nuance of the bride's touch, every subtle shift in pressure, every micro-movement of her fingers had combined to deliver a complex message. One of intimacy, cleverness, shared memory, and unspoken promises. For the groom, it was as if a private language, long practiced and understood only by the two of them, had been spoken in a moment that appeared mundane to the rest of the world. His breath caught repeatedly, not from nervousness or panic, but from a profound emotional realization that this single, carefully orchestrated act had the power to express more than words ever could. He glanced at the bride, whose confident, knowing smile radiated reassurance and playful satisfaction. In that smile, he recognized both the cleverness of her planning and the depth of her affection. It was a look that seemed to say, "We share something extraordinary, something invisible to others, but entirely ours." The groom's astonishment slowly melted into admiration and warmth. The smile reassured him, confirming the security of their bond while simultaneously highlighting the sophistication of her gesture. Each micro-expression on her face, the faint lift of her eyebrow, the soft curl of her lips, the glint in her eyes, conveyed layered meaning, creating a dynamic interplay between visible joy and hidden intent. It was an elegant fusion of love, intellect, and subtle performance, designed to leave a lasting impression that transcended ordinary ceremony. Meanwhile, the guests continued their observations, mostly unaware of the extraordinary emotional exchange that had just occurred. They saw the handshake as a conventional formality, a polite gesture in line with tradition, and applauded the couple at the expected moments of the ceremony. Some whispered compliments about the elegance of the bride's gown, the groom's composed demeanor, or the overall beauty of the setting. A few sensitive observers, attuned to nuances of human expression, noticed the slight shift in the groom's posture, the faint sparkle in the bride's eyes, or the brief intensity in the way their hands had met. For these few, there was a subtle recognition that something remarkable had occurred, an invisible layer of meaning that heightened their curiosity and engagement. But for most, the gesture passed as ordinary, a mundane part of ritual, and therein lay the brilliance of the bride's orchestration. The moment was perfectly invisible yet emotionally transformative. As the ceremony progressed, the groom remained acutely aware of the handshake's impact. His thoughts wandered, recalling the shared memories that the gesture had invoked. Inside jokes, playful competitions, quiet conversations held in hushed corners, the private moments that had woven the fabric of their relationship. Each of these recollections amplified the emotional resonance of the handshake, making the physical act a symbolic encapsulation of years of connection, trust, and love. The memory of that brief, carefully executed motion lingered in his mind like a melody that could not be forgotten. It was not only a celebration of the present, but also a reflection of their shared history, a bridge between past experiences and future promises. The subtlety of the gesture ensured that its meaning remained intimate, inaccessible to outsiders, yet profoundly impactful for the two participants. Time seemed to flow differently for the couple, while the ceremony's rhythm continued around them, punctuated by vows, readings, and music. The groom felt as though he existed in a private temporal bubble where nothing but the implications of that single handshake mattered. The intensity of the moment was heightened by contrast, the outward calm of the ceremony juxtaposed with the storm of emotion coursing through him. The bride's deliberate pacing, her mastery of timing, and the intricate choreography of their interaction had created a moment that was cinematic in quality, as if reality had folded into a heightened narrative, constructed solely for their connection. Every glance, every heartbeat, every breath carried the echo of the secret communicated through that touch. Beyond the ceremony, the handshake continued to reverberate emotionally. In quiet moments afterward, the groom found himself reflecting repeatedly on the significance of the act, analyzing its subtle nuances and the clever thought behind each movement. He appreciated not only the emotional depth it conveyed, but also the intellectual precision with which it was executed. The bride's foresight, creativity, and playfulness had transformed a seemingly ordinary ritual into a symbolic masterpiece of intimacy, demonstrating how attention to detail and understanding of personal symbolism could create profound emotional impact. Each recollection reinforced his admiration, not only for her cleverness, but for her understanding of human connection, subtlety, and theatricality, enhancing his appreciation for her personality, ingenuity, and depth. For the bride, the aftermath was equally poignant. She observed the groom's reaction with a sense of satisfaction and quiet joy, reveling in the successful execution of her plan. Her mind traced the path she had followed to orchestrate this moment, recalling months of careful consideration, practice, and reflection. She had accounted for timing, spatial dynamics, body language, and emotional resonance, designing a gesture that would communicate layers of meaning invisible to the uninitiated eye. The exhilaration she felt was not mere triumph, but a deep emotional gratification. The realization that her carefully constructed act had succeeded in reaching her partner's heart, fostering connection and mutual understanding at a level beyond words. She basked in the private satisfaction of shared intimacy, knowing that the memory of this moment would remain alive between them for the rest of their lives. As days and weeks passed, the handshake remained a defining memory of the wedding. The couple often revisited it in conversation, laughing about its cleverness and reflecting on its emotional depth. Each retelling reinforced the bond between them, reminding them of the shared private code that no one else could fully understand. The gesture became a symbol of their relationship's uniqueness, a demonstration of how small, intentional actions can carry extraordinary emotional weight. Even in mundane settings, the memory of that handshake invoked the same feelings of surprise, affection, and connection, proving that intimacy is often crafted in moments invisible to the world yet profoundly felt in the heart. The ripple effect of the gesture extended beyond the immediate participants. Stories of subtle, meaningful acts of love became topics of gentle discussion among friends and family, inspiring reflection on how small gestures could hold immense significance. Observers began to understand that the depth of connection is often hidden behind the simplest actions, that love can be expressed through intention, nuance, and cleverness rather than only through overt declarations. The handshake became a metaphor for understanding, shared memory, and quiet cleverness, illustrating that intimacy can flourish in gestures that demand attention, perception, and emotional sensitivity. By the time the reception concluded and the couple departed, the handshake had achieved a near mythical status within their shared story. The groom carried the memory like a treasured secret, revisiting it in quiet moments, while the bride savored the successful execution of her plan, knowing she had created a moment that would endure forever. The interplay of surprise, intimacy, and cleverness had transformed an ordinary wedding ritual into an unforgettable emotional milestone. It demonstrated that the smallest gestures, when carefully considered and executed, can leave enduring impressions that outshine even the grandest declarations of love. In the end, the handshake became the defining memory of the day, more memorable than any floral arrangement, music, or ceremonial tradition. It was a testament to the power of subtlety, preparation, and deep understanding between two people. It illustrated how love, cleverness, and intimacy could be communicated in a single, perfectly timed gesture. The bride's ingenuity and the groom's receptiveness created a symphony of emotion that echoed long after the ceremony, ensuring that this brief moment of physical contact would resonate throughout their lives. Every retelling, every reflection, and every shared memory reinforced the notion that even small, intentional acts can carry extraordinary emotional weight, leaving permanent imprints on the hearts of those who experience them. And so the bride and groom walked forward together, their bond strengthened, their understanding deepened, and their hearts forever marked by a handshake that transcended the ordinary, a moment of playful brilliance, emotional resonance, and enduring love. The story of that handshake would live on, not just as a memory, but as a symbol of the profound power of subtle, intentional gestures, reminding all who heard it that even the smallest actions, executed with love and thoughtfulness, can leave an everlasting impact on the human heart.